They've worked on huge projects like Hong Kong's Chep Lap Kok Airport, Holland's North Sea Wall, and Singapore's industrial center. But no one has reclaimed a structure this size and shape before. By November 2001, the race to build this megastructure is underway. 9 barges, 15 tugboats, 4 dredgers, 30 heavy land-based machines, and 10 floating cranes are needed to construct the massive seawall. For the breakwater team, their first step is to build up the sea floor. 3 massive dredgers take up a thin layer of sand from the barren seabed nearby. Then they dump the sand in a layer up to 24 feet thick. This must be done while the sea is at its calmest. To keep it in place, barge loads of rubble are dropped on top. This bed of rock will raise the breakwater from 13 feet below sea level to 11 feet above. It's the beginning of the sea defense. Without it, the island cannot exist. The sloping layers take out the force of the waves as they hit the wall. But the sand and rubble layer is only the base, the core of the breakwater. What really creates the protection is the outer armor. For this, engineers need vast lumps of rock. Each piece of rock weighs up to 6 tons. It's these massive boulders that will protect the fragile island from the destructive force of the sea. But sourcing enough rock is an enormous task. Excavation teams spring into action in 16 quarries across the United Arab Emirates. The 7-mile breakwater needs a lot of rock, 7.2 million cubic yards of it, enough to build 2 Egyptian pyramids. Rock is blasted out of the mountains night and day. Loaded onto dozens of trucks, it begins the arduous journey to the coast. Here, the rocks are piled onto barges and shipped straight to the construction site. It takes less than 24 hours for each rock to travel from quarry to breakwater. 24/7, this floating conveyor belt delivers up to 40,000 tons of rock per day, nearly the same weight as 2 aircraft carriers. The density, size, and strength of each piece of boulder is crucial. This stone wall must last for centuries. There's no concrete or steel holding these rocks in place. These vast boulders are not just dumped in position. Graded by size and weight, it's the sheer volume that keeps them here. Positioned by cranes, each rock must interlock with the next to withstand the full force of the sea. Constant checks ensure that the breakwater is in the right place and the rocks are stable. The only sure way to do this is to send in divers to pinpoint and check every yard of it. Nothing about this megastructure is left to chance. Any movement could cause the rock to crack and the wall to disintegrate, leaving the whole project vulnerable. A detailed study of the breakwater rocks below the surface is noted. Divers are looking for signs of fatigue on these 6-ton boulders. Their fear is that some will have splintered or have been knocked out of place by strong waves. Every 30 yards, a diver surfaces to record the location of the rocks they're checking. The reading is taken from a man based on land. So far, this section of the breakwater stands firm. January 2002, 6 months after work began, a large section of breakwater stands 3 miles out at sea. For everyone involved, it's an exciting time as the dream becomes reality.
When the first breakwater came up, of course, we all went out there. We had to stand on it. This tiny little precipice of rock in the middle of the ocean, and look back at Dubai and say that this is the beginnings of our job.
It's a momentous achievement for the team, but there's still more than 6 miles of this vast seawall to build. The engineers are jubilant, but their happiness is short-lived. Winter is closing in. With a schedule of only 2 years to complete the breakwater, the last thing anyone needs is a delay. Winter in the Middle East brings shamals, great storms with winds up to 35 miles per hour. Wind shifts are sudden, whipping up the sea and bringing torrential rain. Violent thunderstorms or blinding dust storms. On land, little can move. Out at sea, things are even worse. Massive waves batter the boats that need calm water to place the sand and rock with pinpoint accuracy.
We had to seek shelter in the very little shelter that we had built.
Engineers planned for the bad weather, but the storms of March 2002 are worse than they feared.
Everybody crowding around trying to protect themselves from the storms.
The boats find shelter, but will the breakwater hold? Over the next 3 weeks, the storms are relentless. All the engineers can do is watch and wait. The breakwater stands firm, but the schedule is slipping. The construction team is 3 weeks behind and under immense pressure. It's vital that the fragile sand island has protection. Only when a 600-yard section of the breakwater is built can Palm Jumeirah begin to rise above the sea. But the schedule is desperately tight. The entire megastructure must be complete by 2006. They have 2.5 years to create the island and breakwater, and just 2 years to build the city on it. The only way to meet the deadline is for both the breakwater and the island to be built at the same time. It will mean that throughout the build, the Palm Island will have the bare minimum of protection from the sea. But the engineers have no choice. The deadline is set. While the second team building the island waits for the protective breakwater to be built, they keep ahead of schedule by laying the sand foundations below sea level. But now, 8 months after construction began, they're desperate to break the surface. Finally, in April 2002, the first 600-yard section of the breakwater rises 10 feet above the sea. At last, the builders of the Palm can step up the action and bring the island above sea level for the first time. To complete this massive island, Team 2 has the awesome task of finding 123 million cubic yards of sand, enough to cover all of Manhattan 3 feet deep. It's an enormous job, and finding the right sand is an added headache. Dubai has more sand than it could ever need, but there's a problem. Desert sand is the wrong material for the job. It's too fine, the particles won't cling together, and the vast sand island would simply wash away. The engineers must look elsewhere. The best sand for the job is found 6 nautical miles out at sea. It's coarse, packs densely, and is more resistant to wave impact. They will dredge sand from the Gulf seabed, with the added benefit that the dredgers will spend less time transporting material to the construction site. In just 3 hours, a dredger travels to and from the construction site, scoops up the sand, and sprays it into position. It works a 2 square mile area, dredging up the top yard of the sea floor. It takes less than an hour to fill the 8,000-ton tank with sand, which is then pumped through a pipe and sprayed into place at 30 feet per second, enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool in 4 minutes. The process is called rainbowing. The island construction team works around the clock to keep the tight schedule. Night and day, the island grows. The rainbowed sand builds into a sandbar rising up to 13 feet out of the water. But for the engineers, there are mixed feelings. Is the shape of the island progressing as planned?
There's great excitement, and there was great anticipation and a little bit of fear. Is it in the right place?
With doubt cast over the construction, Dubai has a trick up its sleeve. 423 miles up in space. Dubai has access to the only privately owned satellite in the world. It's so powerful it rivals those of the Russian and U.S. military. The satellite